Thank you very much, and thanks, Voita, for coming to the session, but also mainly for organizing. I mean that without people, there isn't a community, and without Voita, there's no people. So hats off, and I don't know. I mean, I've always been a sentimental person, but maybe when I'm getting older, this kind of tradition and otherwise means a lot to me. So last year, or maybe 2 years ago, we were talking about works from the library perspective. And this is kind of my answer to that. That there's clear differences between people who are actually cataloging and people who want to use the data for different reasons. I've been for a long time thinking about the Ferber model. So what was it? Functional requirements for bibliographic records. And there's an idea about work expression and family of works and so forth. And about the Ferber, what I don't like is that it starts with when they're thinking about a work, it starts with the idea that the author has in their heads. So there's this non-tangible part of it all that should lead the model. Whereas we who want to work with the catalog data and want to distinguish editions and works, and especially collections, that model isn't necessarily the best for us. Hence, I use different terminology when I'm talking about these things. Now, one of my points or kind of arguments, and what I've been really interested in lately, past 5 years, is that while we work with the harmonized metadata or do that, we also work with the full text so that we augment metadata from the, let's call them full text. There's also other attributes than just text. We have the images and so forth, that what we can do. We developed a case for genres earlier. So thinking about books, not as that you have one label for a book, it's this genre, or you have multiple labels, but you can actually segment the whole book into different parts. So 18th century work that is philosophy can be partly religious, and there can be differences in that, and especially cases where we are looking at essay collections or something like that. There's a lot of that you can do with modern methods for those. What I'll be talking today about, today's case is looking at coverage between textual overlaps. I'll get to that in a second. And then the idea that while we do this type of analysis, that feeds back to the structured data and the bibliographic records. And what is also important is the quality and the needs balance. So if you're a researcher like me, you don't want to spend your whole life doing updating a catalog. You want to use it for research. And the perfection is never going to happen. Good enough should be good enough. So this kind of balancing act between acceptable quality and reliable results. And all of this depends quite a bit on the research questions. So for some aggregation purposes, if we are looking at cultural shifts, it doesn't matter whether all of the works are connected to the right editions if the system works principally fairly well. But if you are looking at a particular author and want to know what they published, then you need a much better resolution for that. But this is another thing that we are constantly sort of balancing with when we do our work. Now, many of you maybe know what ComHis is, and we've been building this kind of knowledge infrastructure for intellectual history, so years 1450 to 1800, so-called hand-press era for some time. At the center there's the ECCO collection, which is very, very unique. The idea that we have basically 50% of everything that was published in 18th century at our disposal, full images, the OCR text, everything, that's quite unique. And then the idea that is connected to ESTC metadata, English Short Title Catalogue that is a record for the hand-pressed era, so 1450 to 1800 roughly, and about 500,000 records there. And then we got all kinds of newspaper collections, YF, other supporting data and information. And also we have started to work especially with French data. So we have one project called Translation Mining, where we take all of the 300,000 books from Gallica and link those to ECCO, and then look at using a large language model how can we look at translation, and translation not being a full text necessarily, but also let's say paragraphs are included. But I'm not talking about that. If you're interested, we can talk about that at the coffee. But quite a lot of things ongoing in this knowledge infrastructure. Now, what we did, yes, this is an important piece of information. So we worked with the ESTC for a long time, and now finally we've secured approval that we can publish the open data, and that will happen this year. So there's a lot of work ongoing so that we're redoing most of the things that we've done earlier with the ESTC, so that it's in a acceptable open data format, so that people like AVOP can then use that if you feel like it for your purposes. And so for us, this is an important part. And then one thing that is integrated is, for example, this edition work relationship that we've developed over the years. Hopefully this will foster different kinds of collaboration, and especially for different text mining purposes. It makes a big difference. So why, for example, this edition work relationship is important. So if you think about that, you want to find out who are the people who renew language. So if that's your research question, and think that you have 26 editions of Locke's Human Understanding in the data, or you just have the first edition of that, and you scale that question. So you can put so that you're able to choose that. Let's look at the first editions only, or whether we are looking at everything that is printed. Makes quite a big difference in your results, as you probably can understand. Now, works, editions, and collections. So these get very complicated fast. So if there's an essay collection, I will use that as an example in a little bit. You can have a couple of different works, a couple of different collections, and there's the level of one work as editions. You might need that. We need that for many reasons, so that we are able to handle that as a kind of bibliographic category. Or if then you are looking at the collections, how these different works are combined, and then how you go further from there. So that's the difference between. Please ask also if there's something that is unclear when I'm talking, but work level, edition level, so edition being the individual ones of the work, and then these different kinds of collection levels. So things get very complicated very fast, let's put it like that. Now, 2015, we came to one solution to this edition and work based on metadata alone. So back then, what we did, we took mainly relying on the title and the author information. So we harmonized the author information, linked it to YF, did so forth, so that we can pick authors and then start looking at what they published, and the edition statements and the information about publication year and so forth. That you can combine so that we would have something that we can call it work ID. So every work gets an ID, and then basically it tries to map different editions to that. Let's not do that. So here's an example. So you have 3 versions of a book, and here you've got different actor IDs related to them, initial work field, and then an intermediate step, and then you finally get this one ID that combines all of these. So basically, we've done the whole 480,000 books, minus that there's a lot of complications when we get to works that are anonymous. There's plenty of those. So this is far from perfect, but for different kinds of reasons, it works well enough for some of our research questions, like the one that I mentioned, that if you want to limit looking at something we can call first editions, so that you have new works that are being published and not reprints or new editions. So for that, it works well enough, let's put it like that. But there is a challenge, obviously. So we rely quite a bit on titles. We wanted to have this an automated process. So we are not including specialized information, even if we would have it. So if there are mistakes, the mistakes are made systematically. Let's put it like that. And what is lost is these kind of collection level of works. So family of works, we don't have access to that. Or if we go with that, then we lose the actual works within that. But it is all quite okay if we know our author and we know the publication history. It's fairly straightforward. So you have one title, let's say Hobbes's Leviathan, not printed many times at all during the hand press era. So a few books only, easily mapped, and everything is fine. But then when we get to something like Hume's essays, where there are these different levels, these are easily lost. So for example, Hume published essays first in 1742 as a collection. Then there was another part that came out. Then he added more essays to them later. This is all fine from my perspective, so that we can call these essays. But then he has another work called Political Discourses, published in 1752. These are also essays that are then collected together later on. But then there's an essay collection in between that combines more things. And if we have only this one work ID, either we lose the works or some of them, or then we are collapsing them together, calling the collection a work. And this is clearly a problem that with the metadata alone, we were not able to solve. If somebody has a good idea how to also improve this, very interested to hear. So what we did, we came to this text reuse solution. And this is now all work in progress. It hasn't been finished. So input from you, ideas, very, very welcome again for this as well. So we were with 5 PIs. We had this, or still have a big project called High Performance Computing for the detection and analysis of historical discourses. And the idea was that we are doing different HPC processes. So we were doing everything that we could imagine that we'd like to do, mainly with large language models, like that translation mining process and so forth. But one thing that was done, we ran all of the ECCO and EBO and newspaper material through BLAST, which is this bioinformatics algorithm, where you're able to detect textual overlaps, starting from something like 120 characters. That's the length that the sequences can be aligned fairly easily. The problem, of course, with the ECCO and these materials is that the OCR is quite dirty. So if you try to use something like BuzzSim or other, there's a lot of different text reuse programs out there. It doesn't work. So BLAST is fairly good for that. And then you get, since we are in Prague, you get this Harry Potter-like network. You can think that you have millions and millions of text passages that are connected together, and then you can think that what do you want to do with it? So, but that's another thing. There's all kinds of different use cases that we've come up with for the text reuse, but now I'm only going to talk about this work edition and collection level idea. So just to explain, so from the past, what came out is 6.3 billion overlaps. And what you can, of course, guess is that there's a lot of noise there. So there was defragmentation process that had to be done. So then we got to about 1.1 billion fragmented pieces. And from there, after clustering the documents or the pieces across the documents, we then had 91 million different clusters. So one text reuse that goes through many documents. And then there was, of course, identifying the source where it starts. Not so easy again. The directions are fairly difficult, but we had everybody else but people from my group, or some of the people from my group were computer scientists. So we had good support for all of this. And after that, then you have the source and destination. You try to piece those together. And then you have reception edges that are between the sources and destinations. So now we are talking about the many reasons why the defragmentation happens. And even if you have actually a longer, like an edition or work where there are parts, it gives you more clusters than you might think that there actually would be. So that's something that you need to deal with. Well, but in the end, what we have is this kind of a query base. So we have a MariaDB database where through about Spark, we get this system working and the metadata is included and everything. So this pipeline is nicely in place. So once we are at this point, then we can start doing all of the more non-technical things that we as humanists are really interested in. So one thing that we then have built, there's a tool called Reception Reader, where you can look at these textual overlaps as they happen. But what is not in the text reuse or the Reception Reader are the works of the same author, because then there would be too many overlaps there. But we have turned it around and we have this kind of gap finder tool as well. So you can look at, if you're working on a critical edition or so, you can take multiple editions of the same work and see that where are the gaps, what is added or detracted from the different editions. So very useful for this kind of purposes. But for this idea of getting to edition works and collections, then we computed what we call a coverage metric for all of the works. So we can look at how much stuff overall there is between two documents. And then when you have a directed weighted graph, we took that the coverage between the edition or documents needs to be at least 30%. You can start doing looking at how are the works and collections actually formed. So here, now, what we didn't have earlier, so obviously editions are different. There's new things that somebody adds an essay to a new edition. It's still the same edition. There's the idea that there needs to be enough overlap between the works so that we call them an edition of the same work. Now that's a heuristic, and we can argue whether that's correct or not. But then when you rise from the edition level to the collection level, obviously what happens is that what is in a work and going, for example, that 90% going into a collection, where you have then, it's not a collection if there's no other works, there's only 30% coming towards from the collection to the work level, right? Makes sense. And so doing it like this, you don't need any actual other metadata, but just looking at these overlaps and which direction they're going in order to do the mapping of the works, editions, and collections. What we did, then we took some authors that we tested, some 18th century famous people, and came up with the very potential path to detect this relationship in a hierarchical manner. And what is really beautiful here is that no other metadata is really needed. So we just tested, does it work? And it works to some extent. We are not, that's why it's work in progress, because we are not quite finished with all of that. But here's, for example, you can start doing these type of networks. They cluster nicely, Hume's essays and Hume's histories nicely clustered together, working like this. It's an interactive way. You can look at the coverages between the works and things like that. Or then you can do this kind of dendrogram. This is Hume, sorry, it's not the nicest figure, but Hume's works, and they are actually clustering now hierarchically so that we can see the difference between the work edition and also the collection level in some of the cases. Here I took Mandeville's Fable of the Bees that started off as a crumbling hive, a poem that ended up in all of the different works. So then there was an extension in 1714 and an expanded version in 1723, and then a separate work that has the same title. This is important. So even when the work is called Fable of the Bees Part 2, it isn't actually part of the, I mean, it's not volume 2 of the work. It's something different. But they cluster quite nicely. Poem is always included there, and we can see the separations based on just doing the approach based on this text reuse. So fairly happy with this, but these are easier cases. Then if we start looking at something like religious works, where the Bible features shorter versions, shorter text with the similar topics, becomes quite, the global clusterings, it becomes very difficult. But we haven't done so much work on this, and it looks like we will get a new, the aim was to get a new data set that gives us these three new layers. And to me, it looks like that we are going to get there. We need to do some tinkering and then also use the metadata in a more clever way. And once we get some of these more difficult cases working, it will also scale to other cases quite nicely. So it's a very, very promising way. And to me, a good example of where you kind of combine the metadata information that we did first to this kind of a more particular way of looking actually of the content within the works. So approaching it very differently from an individual cataloging something, but really using the automation to create these layers of information, or however you want to put it. Thank you.
Thank you, Raj. Questions from the voice?
Thank you, Mikko, for your talk. Definitely, I would have two comments on it. The first one would be definitely, if we are talking about FRBR, this is some classification which is basically at the moment outdated. Because the main problem of FRBR, in my perspective, was that it was basically a one-dimensional, ontology which creates only the hierarchy that work, manifestation and expression. That's on the ontological level. That means someone has a work which is embodied in some expression and published in some, let's say manifestation. But last year, as far as I know, there was a new conceptual model published by librarian committee, which is LRM classifications, which takes into account directly the things we are always discussing about the works. That means that there are not only these classical ontological relations between various works, but there is something like you have described. That means a relation part to the whole. That means collection and single part of it. Or you might describe with this classification a relation, I don't know, related to adaptation for some kind of art. That means a relation between movie and the book, or theater play and the book itself, and other things like that. So definitely it is something which is currently existing, and I think that it would be great and maybe useful for you, because I think as far as I was analyzing that, it seems to me that it can work for our needs quite nicely. There's one thing. And definitely second thing concerning that text-driven analysis, that would be a great point because of course I think that as you have described, for some cases, especially if you are at that, let's say, collection level, that means that you cannot rely only on the specific title of the work. The textual analysis would be a great tool which can, help you to analyze the content of these collection volumes and things like that. And definitely interested in the further steps you will achieve.
Thank you. So I wouldn't want to say too. I mean, I think that Ferber tried to get most of these that has the families of work and adaptations, the movies and such. They think fairly carefully. I didn't know. I mean, thank you for I didn't know of that new model. Librarians, they're so quick. They always. Well.
James.
Last outputs. So you said we had 6.3 billion overlaps, and then you said something like, as you can imagine, there'd be a lot of noise, and then suddenly you have to 1.1.
Yeah.
What is all that? Like, I'm just genuinely intrigued. Like, what is that 5 billion of noisy overlap?
Yeah. So the defragmentation. So what happens mainly is that like, let's say that here is the actual passage, but then because of the OCR noise at the first level before the defragmentation, it breaks so that you get like 10 individual different ones for that one passage. So this was like there was so much. I mean, well, you can see from the numbers that it's a huge problem. But so and another thing is that when you try to cluster them, there is this sliding window, so that you can have a quote. If you have some very quotable, famous passage, some people print it as a whole, but then you have parts that are not actual noise defragmentation. So all of a sudden you can be in a situation that the window is starting to slide, like you would really not want that to be happening. And so we got, this was not, I wasn't responsible for doing this, obviously, but we got kind of like an intermediate solution to that. But the problem is a little bit kind of like a open-ended, but definitely the fragmentation is the problem here.
I have a question. In one of those challenges you had to find as an example of a part that might appear very often, and quite understandable as a popular work. And I was curious whether you were thinking about having kind of a stop list of works that you kind of know that will appear very often, so you kind of know that this is the work that you're actually not looking for and don't want to have in matches of that work. So you would have kind of a list of works that you don't want to include.
Yeah, so some of colleagues that have been working a little bit also with text reuse, they were talking about big red button that you can press when the Bible comes about. So you get rid of. We're in Prague, so we can say that if you get rid of Bible, it's not so bad. But yeah, we would not want to. I mean, I'd rather think of some other ways. I mean, also the religious works in 17th, 18th century, they play a crucial role. So I would maybe start from the end that because we've got a categorization, for example, for that books. So book has certain attributes that it needs to be of certain length. Let's put it like that. So that maybe getting this first working for books. And then when we get to the pamphlets, deal with those maybe separately. Because then when you get to very short texts that are on a particular theme and there's not that much material. So if you say that, okay, 20 of this one page pamphlet, 20% is overlapping with this long work, that's a bigger problem than individual works as such. So I think that trying to first, like if we have, works that have more than one, I mean, like that maybe more than 2 editions, and starting with that subset and working from there, and then iterate towards more difficult cases. Something like that might be. But it's a bit like the same thing, that we don't want to curate anything by hand, so that if I know that here is a mistake because of my own expertise, and if I'm correcting things, but we're not systematically correcting, then we're in a situation that it doesn't really help, because the aim is to get as big a chunk working as possible. So that if we think about getting structured data out of the unstructured, you want that to be as scaled as possible.
Other questions? Questions from the chat? No? Mikko, you discussed the cluster analysis with the dendrograms. They are not part of the reception reader yet. Do you plan to implement them in the additional reader that you're working on?
Yeah, no. We want to keep that as simple as possible at the moment. So this is, I mean, if you have the data, it's very easy to create these, I mean, on your own. No, there hasn't been ideas yet.
The users don't have the text, so
no, they don't. So, but yeah. The reception reader is aimed at. I can show you my. Oh, this is online. So, so colleagues who come from intellectual history, they don't care about dendrograms. They want to see the overlaps by choosing that. Here's my author. Show me those, and then I look at the other books, see the pages. But yeah, you're correct. I mean, there's quite a lot of different things that we've been thinking that we could add, but the idea has been to that one tool that is fairly simple, and then, for example, this edition reader that we have built on top of it, it's only for our own use at the moment, so that we haven't yet kind of thinking that the tool needs to be stabilized enough before we want to offer it to others, maybe. That has been the kind of thinking for us with the reception reader.
All right. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thanks.